if I see a good movie, it impacts me and it stays in my head for 3-4 days. Even though I'm doing my routine work, it's there. Now, you are in an industry where there are 4 movies getting released, and if you have to do review for all 4, how do you, and if it impacts you, when you do the next movie, it's completely gone because you are involved, invested in the next movie. How do you savor a good movie in your head for 3-4 days, like most of us do?
Uh, I savor it by writing the review. So for me, I watch a movie and then I write the review. So while I'm writing the review, all the things that I enjoyed or did not enjoy in the movie is getting expressed in the form of that review. So it's like what you're processing in your head, I have processed and put it out in words. So it is out in a way before I go to the next movie. I never try and do like 2 back-to-back movies and then try to this thing. As far as possible, I try to avoid that. Unless there is a weird timing in the theater which makes it impossible to watch something later or something like that. So the thing happens. So this acts as a because I really view a review as my processing of a movie, as opposed to advice for somebody else to this is how this movie is and you should watch it this way. And I'm like, who am I to tell you how to watch a movie? It's like, but for me, it's my way of analyzing the film, processing the film, getting that film out of my system by wrestling with the various things that fascinated me and annoyed me and all these other things. So it's like that's all out of my system by the time I approach the next film.
Oh, good to know. I was thinking you will watch 3 at a go and then write
No,
all,
no, no, no.
which is very difficult. That's
Very
why
difficult.
I had
So
this
no, no.
question.
So even at like things like Cannes Film Festival or Berlin or the Venice Film Festival or something. So that's when I developed the habit of writing on my phone, because you stand in these long lines between movies, and I'll watch a movie and then I'll start typing on my phone my thoughts about the movie, and that'll become a small review. Then that thing is out of my system and then I go into the next movie. So now I actually cannot write on my computer anymore. I only type on my phone.
Okay.
So it's like it's
So
become.
the entire blog, you still have your blog, right?
I mean, most of my stuff goes up on my blog, but I type on my phone. I don't use my computer at all, which has become the most, the last useful thing I learned was swimming. After that, this has been it's so useful. I'm in the car, I'm typing out something, I'm in wherever it is. It's like you don't need a bulky computer anymore. You just need, I'm in a flight and I'm typing. It's very, very convenient, especially because the bulk of your work is writing stuff, right? Whether you're preparing questions or whatever it is, you're basically putting words on paper. So yeah.
Yeah, even before you came into visual media, you had this blog. So you will have a short review in the newspaper because newspaper space is limited. And then you have a larger discussion on blog, and then followed by question answers and all that. So that is being followed now also, isn't it?
So yeah, the blog is basically something I began as a portfolio, which I thought, like, tomorrow if somebody asks me what have you done, I can quickly point them to this URL and say these are the things that I've done, as opposed to like individually giving them something like that. But then basically a community grew around it, and they would comment on my blog, and then others would comment on those comments or have a discussion or something like that. I have continued it to this day, both as a way of preserving, like telling people that this is the latest thing that I've done, and so if you're interested, go watch it or read it or whatever it is, and as a way of facilitating that comment section beneath it, where discussions take place. And I'm glad that's still going. It's, I think, some 20 years old or something now, but
There's a lot of interaction going on there. Yeah.
maybe not as much as earlier when people still used to write a lot, but there's a fair amount of discussion that goes on, and it's always interesting to know, and then readers write pieces for the blog, which is always fascinating, because even for a movie, sometimes they'll offer a different point of view, which is always valuable, or they would write something personal, which is also valuable. So it's become a kind of a hangout kind of place, which is nice.
Yeah. Can you tell us a little more about your second book, The Dispatches from Wall Corner?
So that was more like a compilation of my works over the years. I think that was from a time when, it was everything still could not be found on the internet, I guess. So I kind of compiled everything that the publisher wanted, and that became my second book. It's more like a compilation book. It consists of reviews, interviews, and lots of other pieces that I used to write. And actually, looking at that book makes me nostalgic, because from time to time I read pieces that randomly flip to a piece, and I would have forgotten I even wrote it. Because over the years you write like so much that like sometimes I'll be open. Oh my God! Yes, I interviewed this person, and and also sometimes your writing style changes over time. And sometimes you go back and say, oh my God, that's such a horrible sentence. Or you might actually say, wow, that's actually a very nice way of saying something. So all that comes into play, the pluses and the minuses of your days gone by.
And now we'll talk about slightly different things. Portrayal of mental health in movies.
Okay.
So all movies, as I said in the beginning, are about emotions, thoughts, crisis, conflicts and all. But when it comes to portraying specific mental illness, we have grievances about certain movies where it's obvious they have not done any research. So they just use the name but portray something different. But same time, it's heartwarming. There are a lot of movies where they're well researched and the depiction is very accurate, very sensitive. Now, as a reviewer, do you comment on these? Like if there are inaccurate portrayals?
I always think that a reviewer's job is to go into a film and the world of the film and examine that world, rather than bring it out to the real world and examine the film from that angle. So this film is about this particular man and this particular woman and this particular father and this particular mother living in this particular part of the city, and not about Chennaiites or Bombayites or something like that. So it's about very specific people, because everybody, for me, the biggest thing in life, everybody is individual. Like, you can't say, like rich person, poor person, high class person, low class person, because there's no, like, a high class a person may have a lot of income, but they may have the behaviors of somebody you would consider low class, or vice versa. A person may have not much income, but they may have a lot of the traits that you consider high class. So you cannot generalize people. Each person is a different person. So similarly, I think that when I enter a movie, that person is that. But that said, if I know that this condition is so and so, and it's depicted differently, then I would mention that in the review. But with medical conditions, typically I do not know that much. So I would leave it to a medical professional to, like yourself, to say that this is actually not correct. This is what happens. That is what happens. Because all I know is that I'm responding to the plight of this particular person with this particular behavioral traits in that particular movie. It's beyond my range of understanding. For example, let's take, I don't know anything about physics to that large extent. I mean, so when I'm watching that Madhavan movie about Nambi Narayanan, which is rocketry, let's say they're talking about the building of a fuel engine, or they're talking about some velocity factor, something, whatever it is. I'm just consuming it like it's a given. But a person who knows that particular branch of physics is going to be very aware of the fact that, wow, done this beautifully, they replicated the exact science, or they're going to say, oh my God, this is not at all right, accurate, or whatever it is. But sometimes what happens is, for the interest of compression, because a film is, you know, a 2-hour film or 2.5-hour film, so they might have combined two different things to happen at the same time so that the overall narrative does not get disturbed. Because you cannot, like, there may be 100 different stages to the building of a rocket, but you have, let's say, 2 minutes to show that. So you're naturally going to maybe overlay stage 1 and stage 5 without showing stages 2, 3 and 4, simply for time compression. Because what is the ultimate emotional takeaway is that the rocket is being built. Now, if you really want to see how a rocket is being built, you go see a documentary about how a rocket is being built. So I think that is another thing that we should keep in mind when watching a movie, is that there is a lot of compression of, like, because we're talking about mental health and illness, like let's say we're depicting a mental health and illness, we cannot dwell on it to the extent that every single facet of that illness is expressed in the way that the real world manifests itself, because even in the real world there may be exceptions to the way that particular illness is defined in a textbook. So I give it the benefit of the doubt, but yes, but what I would like is that, like mental health professionals like yourself, you watch a movie and you say this has been depicted this way, but typically this is what happens, so that at least people become aware. Because there is a lot of interest in mental health now and awareness of mental health now. So then if the movie initiates a conversation about that particular condition, I would say that's a good, like an afterthought that can happen. But within the movie itself, it's just a story about that particular person with that particular facet of the illness. So like ideally, I would say, don't label the illness. You know, just say, like the doctor is saying to this person, madam, your husband is has this condition where he's hearing strange voices or something like that. As long as they don't name it, then that thing is okay. But once you label it, then immediately those in the know will say, oh, but that is not how it happened, that is not how it happens, or something like that. I think maybe that is one thing that people can do, which is not to label the condition, but just to say what the person is experiencing, so that you know, like you know, it is clearer. But then again, I feel that people should understand that movies are ultimately fiction, and reality is not, it is not a responsibility of a movie to replicate reality. Okay, that depends on filmmaker to filmmaker. Some people may be very interested in replicating reality. Some people may deliberately overdo things for an emotional effect because they are melodramatists or whatever it is. Now, you cannot take everything because at the end of the day, you are going into a fictional world. So I always operate at that level. If I'm watching a documentary, it's a different ball game. But if I'm watching a movie, I always say I'm entering this fictional world where these are the ground rules that the director or the writer has, like they have set up. And I operate by those ground rules.
Thanks a lot. It's very revealing, because I have done the mistake earlier of saying this is not accurate, that's not accurate. But then few things change my opinion, because see, one is the director has creative freedom to stretch things a little bit. As you said, it's a fiction, so they can always stretch a little bit. Second thing is, all illnesses, as you said, don't follow a textbook description. There are differences. Like this I learned because I told one of the directors that two conditions that they have shown doesn't happen in the same person. But the director said, but it was there in somebody whom I knew. So that director was showing a real person, whereas we were thinking of, oh, you should go accurately as in the textbook, because there are a lot of outliers who can have atypical symptoms. So that I learned. Second thing is creative freedom. So we call out only when it's grossly misrepresented, completely wrong. That's one. Or it's a very insensitive portrayal.
And it's like it's like any condition, right? It's you're talking about let's say custodial violence, right? You're talking about a condition which many of us have not witnessed firsthand, and we've read reports and things like that. So, like, as the filmmaker has the freedom to represent that how he or she views custodial violence the way he or she deems fit within the context of that movie. Now, there are people who will say this is too much. Why do they need to say too much or something? But ultimately, the aim of the filmmaker or the aim of the film is to create a visceral reaction in the audience. Now, that is the director's freedom to say, I want to be gentle with this depiction. No, I want to be in your face with this depiction. No, I want to be mid-level where I'm neither, like, I'm kind of like not showing too much nor hiding too much. Or maybe I'm just going to talk about the fact that, you know, in that station, this is what happened, and not show anything at all. These are all valid ways of showing custodial violence, but whether there is no right way. That's what I'm trying to say. There are valid ways, but there is no one right way of depicting anything in a movie. It's like for example, let's take this example of a boy following a girl, which a lot of people immediately label as stalking, right? Now, in an Indian society where it's typically difficult for people of the opposite gender, maybe now not so much, but earlier definitely. If you had an interest in someone, you did find ways of being around that person and trying to like get their attention, or maybe you'd give a love letter, or you'd pass along a note through a friend or something like that. The girl might say no, but as for me, the way I define it in a movie is, as long as the boy is not crossing a boundary, not violating anything, but he's just trying to get the attention of this person, then he's trying to do something. It's like this may be not a correct example, but so that attention, he's trying to get in that particular way. Now, does this come under the broad definition of stalking? Probably yes, but I think you have to define something as benign stalking and like something that's dangerous. Benign stalking is when a guy is trying to attention, and then when you say, boss, enough is enough, then that person goes away, or whatever it is. Or the girl says, you know what, I like this attention, and that's something that I like. One of the big eye openers for me was when I was in a panel discussion, and I've talked about this before, but there was a girl from like a smaller part of Tamil Nadu, and she said that in her college and when she was in school also, it was considered a prestige issue if 2 or 3 boys walked behind you. Like the girls that did not have boys following them were considered losers. Yes. So there was, like, you've heard of this, of course. For me it was like wow, that's a complete eye opener, because immediately if you come to the city and
No, everywhere.
you go on Twitter, you'll immediately say, oh my God, this is stalking. Oh my God, like ban this or whatever it is. But there are these subtle mating rituals that you how do I put it? As long as there is no imposition physically or whatever it is, but because there are times when a certain amount of persuasion is needed to make somebody love you back, or a certain amount of persuasion is needed to make which could be even with an adopted child. A certain amount of persuasion and patience is needed to make the child love you like a parent. Or even while making a friend, you may like a person, you may want them to be your friend, but the other person may not immediately like it. But then you persist, and somehow then that click happens, and you become friends. Now, every relationship is complex, it has layers, and it cannot be reduced to one word or put under one umbrella. So I feel that as long as there is no active like violence being perpetrated, then there is something that
What happens is sometimes like art mimics life, and sometimes life try to mimic art. So what happens is most Indian movies, Hindi, Tamil, they have this formula that the boy keeps pursuing and the girl finally says
Yeah.
yes. So there are real examples where the girl has said no many times,
and the boy doesn't.
but
Yeah.
the boy doesn't stop because his role model is finally you get the girl.
100%.
So that has been a problem which when real life tries to mimic art.
Right. But I'm also saying that, watching the Dark Knight, there was one person who opened fire in a theater in New York City, gunfire, because he was mimicking the Joker. Now, there were millions of people who saw the movie, and this one person or two people maybe mimicked the thing. So there are millions of boys who watch these movies, and 5 or 6 people, behave in these ways. And I would say that is more due to a problem with the boys
Than the movie.
their inability to differentiate between reality and make believe than with the movies depicting something, because then you can say that I cannot write anything at
murder
all, or
story.
like if I write a short story, or let's say like I'm writing anything, you cannot write any kind of story, any work of art or fiction or whatever it is a reflection of the prevailing attitudes of that time. Now, if you look at the 80s Tamil films, there is a strong Thali sentiment, like about this thing where, once the husband is dead, your whole world is gone. Right? Like nothing else happens. Like for example, you're like a woman. Let's say she's widowed. Like that's pretty much the end of her life. That there was this
Yes,
kind of
exactly.
she could not have any desires or something like that, or something like that, they were fairly graphic descriptions of somebody wiping off the sindoor, or breaking the bangles, or this and that, and kind of things like that. Now I'm not saying that does not happen anymore, but the attitudes today have changed. So we cannot look back at the 80s and say those movies are wrong. We can only say that those were the attitudes of the time. Those
Movies were reflecting.
movies were reflecting that. So I always feel movies reflect society, because the people who make movies come from society rather than them influencing society back. I think the reverse is less than this, because I am a product of this environment. I want to make a movie. My attitudes are going to be reflected in the movie that I make, because I'm writing it, rather than I'm making this movie to influence, because I don't even know if my movie is going to be hit or a flop. So how can I make a movie trying to influence this many people or whatever it is, so the people who make these movies about stalking, they're actually they've experienced that, or they have somebody in mind who had that situation and got the girl through that, or whatever it is. Because a lot of what we write, a lot of what we depict is from our own inspiration, or from things that we see in others around us, right? Now you can't go and tell this person, just like you said right now, that till this person told you that this person had both conditions in them which you did not know. We cannot go and presume to know another person's life and say this is wrong, this is right or wrong. We can say outside of the movie that you can of course write an essay saying that I wish movies didn't glorify this so much or that so much, but within the context of the movie you have to understand that's a perfectly valid construct, because in that particular movie that particular person is doing this particular behavior, and if you cannot accept it, then you can never watch any work of art or read any fiction or read anything that is against your worldview. So
That's a nice perspective.
I mean, that's my perspective, and I'm sure a lot of people will disagree, but that's,
And another thing I wanted to add is when there are movies which accurately and sensitively portray mental health, we actually spread the word, we tell people to watch it, so that more than accuracy, we are bothered about the sensitivity in how they handle
Yeah.
it. And it's very heartening, there are a lot of movies which are very sensitive to these mental health issues.
Right, and also see, like for example, when people say uh, you know, like even the word paityam, no? Or loose or something like that. These are all, to some people, it's an actual condition. But in common terminology, it is a carelessly tossed off. If doctor, பைத்தியம் மாதிரி பேசாதீங்க. You're not going to take it seriously. You're going to think between friends or neighbors, something like that. Like it's going to be taken as thing. But that word is a loaded word because it means it's like hey, like within friends you might say, dude, don't be such a bastard. Because it's used like a casual cuss word, right? But the word bastard actually has a meaning. There is a meaning in the real world of that word, which has become a meaningless thing that you just toss off to friends. So if you look at it that way, then everything can be, you can go and poke holes in everything that we do in real life and kind of say, okay, the word bastard can never be used in casual conversation anymore. The word paityam can never be used. The word something can never be used. That's because this everything. So you can go on cancelling or relooking at everything.
No, we are okay with people saying loosadani or loosu ponne. All that is understood in the context. We have a problem only when, in the name of comedy,
Oh yeah.
belittle disability, belittle mental illness. There we call out like that was totally unwarranted.
But again, I have seen in real life, like fat people being shamed, people with squint eyes being shamed, people with lisp being
so
shamed.
you are saying the movie
I'm
is just
seeing these are all things
reflecting
that have happened. These insensitive people, when they go on to make movies, they say, oh, I laughed at it in real life, so people are going to laugh at it when I put it in the movies. I'm not saying that the reverse is not true, but this is coming primarily from observing things around us where people do laugh at such things because like many people are just not very sensitive about these things. Like a simple thing like whatever it is, we all think that all this is funny and we may laugh at certain things, but like children can be especially cruel. And it's not that they want to be deliberately cruel, but because the culture around them has taught them that everybody is talking properly, but this boy is lisping, and because you make fun of him, or he's stammering, so you make fun of him because he is not saying things the right way. Because anything that does not conform is an outlying thing, and that becomes something that should be mocked or like made fun of. We don't necessarily try to understand everything, and this is not just true of children. Even as adults, some of us are downright insensitive about a lot of things, and we don't necessarily try to understand a person or a point of view. We just say, this is different from the way I look at it, so you are talking crap or something like that. Very few people try to say, okay, that's not the way I think. What is it that you really mean? Let me try and understand. Very few people do that. So I think all this comedy is also part of that. It's like it comes from a culture where the culture pushes it into the system where you're kind of like a thing. Because even today, why do you find so few heroines having substantial part in movies? It's because the people who make these movies are still very patriarchal in the way they think about the world, and that doesn't make them evil people. It just means that their understanding is only that much. So when they make a movie, it's all about the hero, it's all about the hero. The heroine is some prop, and he goes and loves her, or she loves him, or whatever it is, and she's just there for a few dances or something like that, and kind of things like that. That is all they write because that is their understanding of the heroine or the importance of a woman in a man's life, or vice versa. So that's something that's coming from society, the society that they've come from, which may not be the society that we've come from. So now that I will definitely say the heroine has no part in this movie, or this movie may not have had a heroine at all, or something like that, because that is something where I feel qualified talking about it. Because if you are putting an actress in a movie and giving her nothing to do, then that becomes part of my job as a film critic, and because I know general human behavior, I can kind of this thing like that. But specific medical conditions, I don't feel qualified enough to.
Yeah. Sometimes we call out, but the problem is the people who will read this call outs on social media are like a minuscule number of people who see the movie. So it's quite ineffective.
Yeah, which is why I also do tweet out your videos, because I feel that even if it's just a few hundred people or whatever it is that bother to watch it, at least those, if that out of my followers that many people watch it or send it to somebody else, it's going to be useful at some point, because it's not it's very important to talk about this so that you at least know, because all of us think that depression is a shameful condition to talk about, because it's like, people typically say the worst things, like, you have so much to be grateful about. Think about the guy who's laying bricks on the road, or laying roads, or doing carrying cement and doing masonry work or something like that. How hard they're suffering. Look at you, and you're saying you're depressed. That's not the way you console a depressed person. That's like, because depression has nothing to do with the life or class or this or that or something like that. It's like, but when a Deepika Padukone says that she's undergone depression, half the people are like, dude, what have you got? You're earning crores per movie or this thing, something like that. You're saying, why should you be depressed? But that's what I'm saying, that sensitization does not happen immediately, but I still think it's important that someone like in that position speaks out, so that at least some people understand that depression has nothing to do with how much you've achieved, what success you've had, or whatever it is, because it's about the chemicals inside you and your brain, and what's happening inside, which is kind of, it doesn't mean the loss of a parent necessarily, nothing that external
events also
can. What I'm saying, it doesn't necessarily have to be that. It can also be something internal that's.
Sometimes people can get depression when nothing is going wrong around them.
Yeah. So, and that can really affect the way you function. So, I think it's important for word to get up around about this, but I don't necessarily think that films are the best medium to do this, because that's a fictional medium. And I don't think fiction is a very good way to educate people about various things, because fiction is read as fiction. People watch a movie, they say either, oh, I had fun, or they say, ayo pavam, and then they come home and they forget it and they get about, reading, leading their own lives. It's a very small population that actually takes these things very seriously, thinks about it. See, for example, when Tare Zameen Par released, there was a lot of little bit of talk about dyslexia, but today who talks about it? The movie is gone, that condition is gone, the thing is gone, and probably people who are dyslexics,
there was a sudden increase in awareness.
Yeah, and probably people who are dyslexic are still facing those same problems, because one movie cannot change anything. It can maximum cause a spike in interest, but then today our attention spans are so less that by the time you've started talking about Tare Zameen Par, next 5 movies have come and people are looking at those. Yeah. So I would say that. Yeah,
but I would say Tare Zameen Par did a lot of good, because awareness became better, attitudes changed. But as you said, it's a small drop in the ocean.
It's a small drop in the ocean, because the people that need exposure to these conditions and who've not been exposed to these conditions, or do not have the terminology to express these conditions, they typically exist outside of the audience of a movie like this. They will not go and see a Tare Zameen Par. They will probably go and see some other movie. A Tare Zameen Par is like preaching to the converted. You are talking to. You're making a sensitive movie for people who are sensitized and who are sensitive and will probably go and watch a movie like this. Like, you're not talking to, an average person is not going, they'll probably go and watch another movie where you're talking about, see, for example, why does a Three Idiots work much better than a Tare Zameen Par? Because there's lots of comedy in that movie. There's a lot of jokes and this and that, and which kind of make it palatable, even though you're showing things like The whole movie is about the pressure of our education system and things like that, but there's a lot of comedy in it, and so people go and laugh and identify with it, and also because everybody goes through some kind of educational education, and therefore like as in everybody who can afford it goes through some kind of education. Most of the audience who has seen this movie goes through some kind of education. They would have all faced some kind of pressure or problems or whatever it is, so they identify with that condition. Whereas dyslexia is so localized and so so specialized that that becomes something else. Tare Zameen Par is about dyslexia, right? I'm suddenly like forgetting.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, yeah. So that becomes a much more specialized thing. There's another movie called 15 Park Avenue, which is about schizophrenia, and that was even more of a niche film, which very few people saw, and even the people who went to saw were people who were interested in a story about somebody with schizophrenia, which is a very minority of the cine-going population. They don't want to see such like specific narrow conditions. They would rather see broader issues that are tackled, which are easy to digest, because like people when you go into these things, you're also going to it's going to be a sad movie. It's going to be a very depressing kind of movie. It's going to be a movie that makes you feel low, and a majority of people do not go to movies to feel low. Even if they go to a movie about a psycho killer, at the end of the day, the killer, they want to be identified and put behind bars or apprehended by the cops or killed or something like that, so that there is closure from the misery. Yes. If a movie says at the end of it the killer is still loose, like Zodiac, for instance, which is one of the great movies of this century, it doesn't do very well. Because there's that sense of lack of completion. Oh my God, this person killed all these people and he's just loose. Now I'm like left with I'm imagining all sorts of things because this person is not like been captured. So I think there's a it's relating movies to real life is a very complex thing, and I really, again, I'm not dismissing it, but I think more studies need to be done about these things. For example, I have read of a study that studied the effect of violent video games on adolescents, okay, and found that people who played violent video games were more likely to be physically abusive in school than people who did not do that. Now, but that's one study. And any study typically is like a limited population in one particular country done by one, like kind of a thing. Now, this is across the world. So these things need to be like wider spread, just like you analyze physical conditions. Like, when, like for example, cancer research is not restricted to any particular country. People throughout the world are researching cancer. Like that, these things should be.
Yeah, there are studies, not in India, but there are studies looking at television effects on people's behavior.
No, there are.
Movies, people's behavior, but then mostly in the West. Mostly not West, mainly in the US.
Mainly in the US. So, and again, because people differ so much in terms of culture and society and all those kinds of things, is that applicable to us? That's a question that we have to ask. So, that's what I'm saying. I'm not dismissing it, but for me, fiction is fiction, real life is real life, and again, because that is my viewpoint, I'm not saying everybody should subscribe to it.
That's a very, very good, valid perspective. So it's always a pleasure to talk to somebody who's very passionate about what one is doing, and it was great talking.
Thank you. I always think I talk too much, but thank you for listening to me.
And thanks a lot for coming and participating in this.
No, thank you so much
interview.
for the work that you do, because I think it's incredible, and I have approached you and I've had my anxieties, and you have helped me a lot. So it was a real pleasure to, in any way or form, if this has been helpful, I'm very happy.
It will be. You'll be taking the message to a lot of newer audiences.
Thank you for that.
So
yeah,
thanks a lot.
Thanks for having me
Thank
over.
you.
Yeah.